Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Taking Back the Narratives podcast. This season, we are focusing on delving into the post October 7th genocide reality. I'm so honored to have on my dear friend, Lilly Schwartz, whom I've known in the online space for a good several years now. And Lily and I will get into a little bit more how we know each other, what we found, positive about each other online. So, a little bit of Lily's background. Lily served in the IDF as the International Policy and Military Coordination in the J6 Cyber Defense Directorate, playing a crucial role in fostering positive relationships with international military personnel through cyber training. Very impressive. In her current role at Nevut, Lilly continues to channel her dedication towards supporting lone soldier veterans in their transition to civilian life. Her focus remains on developing initiatives to address the unique challenges faced by veterans, parents, and spouses during this crucial phase. Lilly is also married to her husband, Zalman, also a proud lone soldier veteran. Welcome, Lilly, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, I've thought of you for the last, so we're on season 3 right now of the podcast. I've thought of having you on since season 1 in some kind of capacity. It just, unfortunately, the topics at hand and what's been going on, you accelerated, in terms of reaching out to you. But overall, I just thought you would be the perfect guest. And just so happens, here you are. So, to give the audience a little bit of a background, so I remember coming across your profile and seeing this badass Jewish girl, blonde hair, in the army, and I just thought I need to know who this girl is because yes, there are lots of women serving in the army, but I also knew that you are American, if I'm not mistaken, right? And
Mhm.
it's not every day that, at least from my perspective, and you'll fill us in a little bit later talking about lone soldiers in Israel, but I had only come across lone soldiers who are male in
Uh,
Israel. So when I saw your picture and what you were posting from Israel, I sprinted to friend you and I followed your posts, and it just seemed that you were sharing the real deal of what was going on in Israel, uh, a little bit of geopolitics, and so I just really admire you and thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you do. It's making a really, really big impact on the Jewish community and Zionists all around the world. So a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Cleveland. I grew up on the West Side. I grew up your average Reform Jewish kid, always loving Israel. I ended up going to Kent State after high school. Um, and I actually started out as a music performance major. I wanted to play the viola professionally for a living. And then after a year, I decided, it's not for me. Also, it's important to add that I was very liberal.
Mhm.
And once I actually saw Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders speak at Kent's campus, and it just really rubbed me the wrong way. And so I became myself, which is, I have my own views. I consider myself to be right wing. And so I was switched my major to international relations, communications, and minor in Jewish studies. And then I ended up dropping out and making Aliyah and joining the army. So,
Wow, so I have so many follow-up questions to that. So you said you grew up in Cleveland. Was it a big Jewish community? I just don't hear much about Jews in the Midwest, and I find it fascinating that we're everywhere. So, what size about community was it? And would you say that overall it was a pro-Israel community?
yeah, so I grew up on the West Side. The West Side is not predominantly like a Jewish area. The East Side big Jewish community, and I'm in the East Side right now. Um, I think like growing up Reform, conservative, everyone was very pro-Israel, so that's a plus. I mean, I haven't seen many Jews here, part of different congregations who are anti-Israel. They're very supportive, so that's really nice. All different spectrums.
Wow, interesting. And also, like, it could be, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 41. So when I went to college, plus I was a business major, I seem to have eluded any anti-Israel activity on my campus. And so the first time I came across any anti-Israel activity was all the way in 2013. I went to grad school at Columbia. I did a nonprofit, a master's in nonprofit management. And also, it wasn't in my program. My program, it was a night program for professionals. We would work during the day, we come. There was no agendas. It was just pure topics that they were teaching. By a couple classes that I did have to come in for during the day, I would see, Apartheid Week on campus. And I saw these images of dead children from Syria, from the Syrian civil war, being projected as children in Gaza. And of course,
Yeah, they love doing that.
they love doing that. But then what upset me more was SSI, Students Standing for Israel, was tabling across the little pathway. And all they were saying was, Humus, not Hamas. that,
Yeah,
that,
it's pretty
that's
like,
that's no way to educate anyone, because here you are screaming about hummus. The kids across the way are showing dead children, pretending they're from Gaza. Like, so who are you going to feel not only bad for but angry towards? Right, you're
yeah.
angry towards these hummus not Hamas people. And then I remember also being in the girls' bathroom and seeing a swastika with fuck Israel, like, circled around it. And I went to the administration, complained. They
They
didn't
don't care.
care. Then I went to the Israel engagement director at Hillel, and she said, and this was okay, so mind you, this was 2013. And so
Hmm.
she said, look, our students here, they're all J Street, and we're trying to prevent them from even being, if not now, or JVP. And so she was saying how, the board that they have, they don't want the Israeli flag. Forget about flying outside, not even inside. And so this poor woman, she's the reason I mentioned her, she served in the IDF, proud family of IDF soldiers. And she's like, this is what I'm dealing with. And I was shocked because the Hillel where I went to undergrad at American University, I graduated in 2004, and they were strong. There was a couple skirmishes on campus with the Muslim Student Association. 5 minutes later, Hillel was out there, protest over. So it just shows you like the strength that's needed to push back. And then when we hide who we are, we don't know our facts. This is
Yeah,
a
most definitely. I mean, so SSI, I was very active in, and I will tell you this, they have really done great work on campus recently.
yeah,
They're trying to shift away from the homos
not
not
cool. Yeah.
Hamas, which is good. I'm best friends with the vice president, Sophia Witt.
Mhm.
And I mean, the work they're doing is great. I think the problem that I'm seeing, and I saw when I was on campus, is people lack the confidence and Jewish pride. And they want to focus more on pleasing the public, people who aren't Jewish. It's very liberal mentality. And it makes people stray away from their Jewish identity. They stop caring about their own people and they'd rather please others. And,
Absolutely. You're so on point. So the only thing, I mean, I'm not going to get into SSI on here. Uh, I've had conversations with Elon. So
mhm,
the thing also with them, and it's not just, I'm not isolating them, it's all this going into like why Zionism is important to us.
mhm.
It's that I grew up very well. So I didn't know I was a Jew until I was 7 years old. I found out in a really interesting way. I was watching Lassie. I don't know if you remember that show. Um, very old school, but like little boy, Christian boy, and with his like dog Lassie.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, like
last.
he's very religious, and so growing up, I I mean, this didn't go on for a long time, but maybe like a couple of weeks. I would emulate how he was praying before bed, getting on his knees, crossing himself, and praying to Jesus. So I did the same thing, right? It's like I thought every kid in America did that. So I was doing that for a couple of weeks, the full crossing, kneeling. My father walks by my room one night, sees me, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, dad, like I'm just praying to Jesus." And
No
he's
way.
we need to have a conversation. We need to have a talk. So I found out I was a Jew and I was fascinated, right? Like, ooh, like I'm part of this Jewish. Well, I didn't even know, like, is it a real? I mean, now obviously I found out years later, Jews are not a religion. We're a people with a faith and customs and culture. By the time I had no idea. I was just like, ooh, I'm part of something different, something part of not the mainstream. So I was
Mhm.
begging my parents to go to send me to Hebrew school. And they said, no, the only rabbi in the area, he's very liberal. We did not just come here from a communist country for
Yeah.
you to be indoctrinated. So that was like 8, 9 years old by the time I was trying to go to Hebrew school. Bat mitzvah age is coming up. So, well, like you said, like you grew up like reform. Everyone around me was reform conservative. So girls were getting bat mitzvah at 13, right? Like not 12. So again, I'm seeing my Jewish friends go to Hebrew school, getting ready, for their Haftorah portion. And I want that, right? So I was like, oh, like I'll help pay for a Hebrew school tutor with my babysitting money. They're like, no, 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 you're not doing that. We'll do one better. We're taking you to Israel. Okay, so my first trip ever was to Israel, and we'll rent a rabbi. Literally, their words. We're gonna
Mentor rabbi, I love that.
as if it's like some commodity in the store. And you'll have your bat mitzvah on the Masada. So like off we went to Israel, and I knew like something was different being there. Like something felt more special that I hadn't felt in America. And I remember on the Masada, he was trying to talk to me about Anne Frank because we just learned about her in school. But I was more interested about the Judean warriors that he had just spoken about. And I was just I remember standing there and thinking, like, oh my gosh, like the sacrifices they made, the bravery pushing back against these Roman aggressors. I felt so proud to be Jew. So anyway, so that I was 13. So I come back, you're thinking, after this amazing trip, I'm going to be a Zionist, right? Like, what else could go wrong?
Right.
The media, but more so the Jewish organizations that I was part of. And so they were using all these anti Semitic terminologies like Palestinians and West Bank and settlements, obviously Palestine, East Jerusalem. And so to me, I got angry at Israel. Like, how dare Israel build up these settlements? Like how dare Israel come in and steal? Like how did these Jews come in from Europe, right? Because I was convinced like we're all like white Europeans. Like how
Mhm.
dare we come in from Europe and steal the Arabs' land? So everything that is going on now that people are angry about, that's how I was for close to 20 years. And I was part of everything. I was part of ZOA, Camera, uh, uh, what else? ADL, APAP, like
Mhm.
name an organization. I was part of it,
Mhm.
and that none of them made me pro-Israel. I mean, I was like part of the Jewish community, but I was just like so confused. I was like, oh, so like everything I'm reading in The Economist and the New York Times, it's being repeated at these events. So to me, that was my Zionism journey, from being pro-Israel to for a long time being anti. And
Wow.
so that's why I decided to start my own Zionism education company because no one else was teaching these terms. And it's those terms that either fuel anti-Semitism or using accurate terms, it's what combats anti-Semitism. So,
Mhm.
something like SSI, like, and I know they are doing like better work now, but the terminology also needs to match, so like
Right.
it's like the last nail in
Right.
in the
Definitely.
advocacy coffin. So for you, okay, so tell me, because to me, I always want to know details. What prompted you to make Aliyah, and how old were you when you did that, and all that came with that?
So, because I switched from being a music major to international relations and communications, I was very much behind in my core credits at Kent State. And it got to a point where I was so invested, like in advocacy and being that person that has a strong Jewish presence on campus, not afraid of people. Um, it prompted me, like, once I spoke to my advisor and she said, "Oh, you actually have 2 more years." I said to her, I said, "Well, I want to join the IDF. I'm not going to be able to if I don't do it now." And I was in my last year. She said I had 2, 3 more years, finish up your core courses. And I said, I'm out. And I
And did
called
you
my
know?
parents.
And so, Lily,
What?
did you know other women who, like your age, who were joining as lone soldiers, or you just went?
Not really. No.
Yeah.
No, I knew my husband, who was my boyfriend then. We met when I was on a trip with Young Jewish Conservatives, really great organization.
Hmm.
Um, and we dated for 3 months, long distance. And when this happened, I called him up first. I said, I think I'm gonna come make Aliyah. And he's like, what? And um, then I called my parents, told them the deal, and they were supportive.
That's
Hmm.
so great to hear. And what I want to, we're going to hear more about your lone soldier experience a little bit later on in the episode. But so, where were you on October 7th? Were you in Israel or were you in America?
So I was in Ohio, by our shul here in Akron, Ohio, Rabbi Moshe Sasankin and Anshe Sfard. It was Simchas Torah. We stayed by them. We love the congregation, great shul. Um, Basically, we woke up Saturday morning, and normally, like, I'm not gonna check my phone. Like, obviously, Shabbos, like holidays make sense. Um, but I'm getting all these buzzes, like really, really big buzzes. And the reason I flipped it over is because a few of my family members are ill, and God forbid, like, that's where my head was. I looked at it, and it's my group chat of lone soldiers saying there's a war, like, how do we get back? 100 messages within like a minute, no joke. And I opened it. I'm like, what's going on? I thought it was just like some rockets, like whatever, the usual. No, like the videos. I woke up my husband and said, like, there's a war, like this is serious. Um, and within a few hours, he had, one of his really close friends from the police in Israel was murdered. Um, and then just more and more and more, like within hours, he had lost like 6 friends that he knew very closely. Um, so he said, like, I'm not going to do it if you don't want me to. I'm not going to go. But he was called back to reserve duty from the border police, which is where he served in his mandatory Sadir, is what it's called. It's like your service. And then he ended up going to a different unit for a career. But he said, like, do you support it? I won't do it if you don't. I said, listen, you got to do what you got to do. I support you. This is different. It's going to be hard, but you have to do what you have to do. And next morning, we woke up, and my rabbi and Rebbitzin made us a plate of food, and we took off, and he went to the airport. And yeah.
It just shows too how different we are as a people. Like
Mhm.
you read about wars all over the world, and what do a lot of those citizens do? They flee,
Mhm.
right? We're the only people that were complaining that there were not enough flights to go back for the soldiers.
Right, right. It's
And the
crazy.
reservists, right? So they, and you can correct me on the numbers here, but it was what, 350,000 reservists, and more showed up than needed, or more were trying to sign up, right?
Yeah. So many guys came back from all over the world. and including the ones in Israel, because it's like it struck a chord in us like this is, a fight for survival. We're not gonna just sit back and let it happen.
And this is something that I know, like we didn't speak about this at all off camera, by just thinking about this recently, I think this morning, some people really emphasize how the world view has shifted, right? Like pre October 7th, post October 7th. I mean, this podcast is called Delving into the Post October 7th Reality.
Hmm.
Then I was thinking about it from my end, and you're welcome to agree or disagree. I don't know if I was so now, 6 months in, so shocked about A, what happened, and B, how the world is responding, and in terms of what I do, it seems to be a continuation, just a little bit more intense, right? Just it's like a little bit more needed to make sure the facts are out. And I'll say why. So I was in Israel actually, and I still have, I think I need, I mean, not to, downplay people who have real PTSD, because I don't, I just have massive guilt because I was in Israel for Sukkot. And it was my first time ever. And I was so excited to be there for, even though I'm not observant, but it's also,
It's
something
beautiful. It's special. Yeah.
well, right. And I heard for years like how special it is to be in Israel during that time. So I went and it was very different. I've just been to Israel on tours, with I've been with JNF, I've been with Chabad, JLI. By the way, for those who are listening, JLI is one of the best tour. Go, no matter if you're
A bad
observant.
tour?
Yeah, if you're
Oh,
observant,
good
not
or
observant.
bad?
They're not only are they the best, they're the most fun. They go, okay, and this is important, and I know you're gonna love this. Most tours to Israel do not go anywhere in Judea and Samaria. They just don't touch it, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But JLI did. And I was so appreciative of that. And plus, like, they're fun. And yeah, I was younger by like 25 years than everyone, but it's those older people that are like the most fun to travel with.
Oh, definitely. They
At
take
least
you to Hebron.
yeah, we went to Hebron.
Good.
We went to Rachel's
Boom.
Kever
Mhm.
in Bethlehem. We went everywhere, everywhere. We
Favorite
went to
places.
Athletes. Like, no one takes you to Athletes. Like no one like knows about that detention camp where Jews were housed. But we also did like fun things too. Like we went to Rosh Hashanah. Like every day, I was just like, "How am I tired?" And these 80-year-olds are not. So anyway, so this is my first time in Israel, not on a real tour.
Mhm.
And all of my female friends were busy. They just were.
Oh,
So I hung out with like random Facebook guy friends, like
good.
4 or 5 of them. So like a different, and I don't mean this in a slutty way, but like,
Oh,
I
oh,
would have like dinner with one guy and then like the next guy, the next day I would hang out with someone and go to the Judean desert. So like, it was very, very just different, but very special. I also went to my first ever Havdalah. This was in, oh my gosh, what's that really cool neighborhood in Jerusalem? Uh,
Nachla.
yes, thank you.
Mhm.
That was just, amazing. So anyway, so I was there that whole week. And what I remember feeling and thinking was it is so peaceful here because I had just been to Israel a year and a half, before, and there were terrorist attacks. And it was just so awful because I was angry. Like, and when these terrorist attacks would happen, I was like, oh my gosh, like, are people okay? Like, I want like, follow up. And then the people on my tour, they just were so nonchalant about it. It's like, oh, well, it was in the West Bank. Who cares where it was? A terrorist attack against Jews is a terrorist attack, whether it's in Judea and Samaria or in Tel Aviv. It should not matter.
Mhm.
So I remember just being very surprised that week, very quiet, nothing was going on. And it was just this beautiful, as you know, beautiful, peaceful, and I emphasize peaceful, peaceful time. So the reason I feel so guilty, I was slated to come back home on the 6th, or actually, yeah, like on the 6th. Um, and I was telling my mom, I said, I really want to stay here another week. Like, I'm having the best time. I want to be here for Simchat Torah. I want to experience everything there is. And she says to me, you really should come home. I'm like, I was debating up until the very last minute. I almost got on the plane.
Mhm.
And I felt like, all right, I'll come back. I'll come back in a year, it'll be fine. Maybe my mom is right. So I got back home. Obviously, I was jet lagged. I wake up in the morning, not because of anything. Like, I didn't even think to turn on the TV. I was just like, when you're jet lagged, sometimes you can't sleep, right?
Right.
And my sister, who never texts me unless there's an emergency, and no, and we're fine. But like, she usually does not text me like, out of the blue. So she texted me, "Did you hear what happened in Israel?" And I remember texting her back. I'm like, Israel's fine. I literally had no idea. I said, Israel's fine. I just came back from there like less
Mhm.
than 24 hours ago. She's like, turn on the news, turn on the news. I'm like, okay. And I turn on the news and I saw first, well, let's talk about the numbers, right? So first they were reporting 22 dead. And already that was shocking, 22. Because as you know, and maybe our audience, knows as well, some don't, like typical terrorist attacks in Israel as of late, two, three, four, maybe five max of people murdered. And look, one Jew murdered is one too many, but
Mhm.
22 was alarming. And then hours later, I remember seeing 50 and I was shocked. And then it was 152. I mean, you remember, like the whole like couple of days, it was just like growing,
Yeah.
growing, growing. And emotionally, I was stunned. Like I couldn't move. I was obviously depressed. I'm not a crier. I was crying. I just could not function for those, like honestly, like for 2 weeks. And I'm not Israeli. I don't have family anymore in Israel. I did before some of them moved to Bulgaria. But those are our people,
Mhm.
and it took a while. Like you know me, like I post so much, like online. I didn't even post anything for like 2 weeks straight. So like,
Yeah.
let me ask you, so emotionally, like how are you and your husband handling this, especially being lone soldiers?
Yeah. So for me, at the beginning, like when he actually landed in Israel, when Zalman landed, I was just constantly checking the news, seeing the updates, and it sounds really like maybe crazy or sad, but like I always check the news and make sure that his name isn't on the list of soldiers who were killed.
Right.
He was busy. He didn't tell me until after he came back because he actually went back to the unit that he served in for a career, which is Yamar Yerushalayim, which is undercover field intelligence police unit. Um, and he just had me under the impression that he was staying with his officer and he's waiting for the, system to let him do his reserve duty. He was in the south clearing the fields, which is when you look for terrorists hiding out. And he saw a lot of, you know, terrible things.
What no one should see.
Yeah. And
And
I
so
just found out.
let's backtrack a little bit, just because I'm curious, our audience could be curious as well. I'm used to like the American military and the system, how it works here. So in Israel, so when we hear about Israel calling up the reservists, right, like 350,000, obviously regular army is regular army. So, and we'll get into the lone soldier program a little bit later on. But before we do, I think that this is important to clarify to everyone. So, is there a difference in, I don't know how to properly state this. Okay, so the reservists, are they like a backup to the real army, to the regular army, or are they just like a supplement? And then the people who were called up to reserves, but then I know some people were not called up. So what what was the criteria for people to be called up versus not called up? How
So,
is it working?
yeah, I don't know about the supplemental thing because that's a good point, but I'm not sure. I will say that a lot of guys came back without getting the Tsav Shmona, which means like that's your call back to reserve duty.
Mhm.
A lot of guys who are active reserve duty and they do like a few weeks every year, just even if they live in the States, like yeah, they got it, maybe not the same day, but Zalman got it like within hours.
Okay.
Because my guess is because he was in the border police, he was in Magav.
So it
Uh,
depends more, you think, like on the unit rather than any
I
other.
think so, because there was a lot of guys who came back to Israel and, from the US and they wanted to like do something. They didn't necessarily get their Sav Shmona. They weren't necessarily called, but they wanted to go and they wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to make a difference. They wanted to protect the people. So I know a lot of people were like fighting to get into units. Like, let me in. Like,
Actually,
let me in, coach.
my best friend's husband was one of those people fighting because he's
Mhm,
Israeli, although he just became an American citizen, but very recently. So he's Israeli and he was a commander in the army, maybe even a higher position
mhm.
years ago. And so they were in Israel already. So he, showed up on base. But the thing is that his old unit was dissolved. So they said like we don't have space for you anywhere else and like thanks but no thanks, and he was livid because obviously he wanted
Yeah,
to contribute. So another question I had, maybe others do too. So there was a delay in a military response from Israel, right? Because October 7th was, I call it a genocide. Personally, I get angry, and no offense, like if you call it something else. But when I hear there was an attack on October 7th, I don't understand how that's even a descriptor of what happened.
it was a massacre.
Yeah, massacre,
Full
genocide,
on.
it's right, like it's interchangeable. So I okay, where were we going with this? Oh yeah. So there was a delay in what we saw. Obviously what I'm seeing on the American news could be very different from what actually was happening. So the American media, they were just like, biding their time, like, when is Israel going to attack? When is Israel going to attack? But I also was following people who were, I'll just say, I don't want to give away too many details, military adjacent. And I saw some of the airstrikes much, much earlier than what the news was reporting. So
Mhm.
if you are able to share, did the army go in earlier than what at that time was being shared into Gaza?
From what I understand, like, no, I don't think we went in early enough. The fact that we even got to the point where we allowed this to happen is our fault. I mean, I think it has to do with like being overly confident and just the division in the country at that time that we totally underestimated their capabilities and their real goals here. I mean, the
Absolutely.
fact, yeah,
So let's I just wanted to go back to a little bit what we were talking about before. So you said, and I agree with you, that delay, although again, like I'm not in the army, so when I heard, the Israeli officials say like, oh, but we needed this time to prepare and like really lay out our military objectives, what are your thoughts on that? So like why the delay, and what did the delay allow the I mean, also, like, I don't say like Hamas because like what is Hamas, right? Like you have the Gazans are Hamas, right? Like
all of them,
they didn't just come in from, a different country and assume power. Like Hamas
they
is
were
the
elected.
yeah, well, not only that, not only what landslide election, but okay, fine. So Hamas terrorist dies. There's, before this war, another pops up within the population. So,
Yeah,
and I have no look. I have the ultimate respect for the IDF. I think what they're doing is beyond brave. It's the Israeli policies that I have, and I feel bad for the soldiers. And I cannot even imagine. We can get into the like with what you do, like what is the sentiment with the government and the delays in the negotiations and the capitulating to, I call him Jihad Joe even on the podcast. I cannot even say President Biden. Well, he's not really a president. One would have to win an election for that, fairly, but you know
not my president.
he never was, yeah. So, and the thing too, so you said like like this is our fault, and I agree with you. So I was in Egypt about a year and a half ago in the end of 2022. I went to Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and I went back to the UAE. I didn't want to go at first. My mom wanted to see the pyramids. I'm like, oh, they hate Jews. I don't want to go to Egypt. And then her 70th birthday was approaching. She's like, look, like, it's only one time you turn 70. And I wanted to put family in front of my convictions. I said, okay, fine. I'll go on this cruise with you. And it was shocking to see the absolute insane but needed security in Egypt. Like have you been to Egypt before?
No, I really want to go.
Okay, so well, maybe like not right now. We'll see
Yeah, nah.
how they react. But when I was there, they weren't part of obviously the Abraham Accords, but they were like, behaving themselves. And Sisi, I still love Sisi. Like I don't care. He'll go down as my favorite Middle Eastern prime minister because of what he did, right? Like he eliminated the Muslim Brotherhood. And how did he do that? He killed almost all of them. The ones not he, his henchmen did. The ones that were not killed, he has them sitting rotting in real prisons in Egypt, like real prisons, and they're not Americanized prisons, not the Israeli nice prisons, real damn prisons. So
Mhm.
anyway, so when you are in Egypt, to drive from Alexandria, Alexandria, sorry, into Cairo, there are checkpoints, real checkpoints. You get out of the bus, okay? They're not like peering in, like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're fine. Get out of the bus, empty out your bag. Then there's a line for men and there's a line for women. So women get their female soldier, men get their male soldier. They touch you in places that is meant for a relationship. you know,
Seriously?
Seriously, like they investigate your body, okay? Like obviously with gloves, like and you're wearing clothes, but like they'll like go up into crevices that only a boyfriend or girlfriend should or husband and wife should get
Oh,
into.
wow.
So, and that was only the first set of checkpoints that I was at. And so the next day we went down to the south. Um, in that, it was a huge area. There were 10 checkpoints that we went through the entire day, five getting into the area, five getting out. On top of that, you are not allowed to, whether you're a citizen of Egypt, whether you're a tourist of Egypt, to even photograph anything governmental. So, like, no government buildings are allowed to be photographed. You cannot photograph security patrols. You cannot photograph a soldier. So, like, what we're talking about, you're obviously served in the IDF. How many videos and pictures are there out anti-Semitically, even before this war? Oh, look what this soldier did and that. And, checkpoints here, checkpoints there. It is not allowed in Egypt. I went to Jordan. Same thing. There were checkpoints everywhere,
Hmm.
soldiers everywhere. You go to Saudi Arabia, so they amp it up even further. Checkpoints everywhere, soldiers, plus there's cameras everywhere, right? Like 20, like it's just surveillance. UAE, so you don't see soldiers, but you cannot do a lot of things. I mean, there's no checkpoints there because it's very safe, but
Mhm.
they clamp down on security. And so like in Dubai, what they do, they control the internet. So if someone looks up a jihadist site, they're arrested. Actually, the other month there was a video in Mecca. There was a woman who was hoisting the terrorist flag because it's not a Palestinian flag. Palestinian was a colonizer term for Jews for 1,812 years, just like Palestine was a colonizer term for Israel for that amount of time. So, anyway, so she was hoisting the flag of terrorism. Within minutes, she was arrested.
Yeah, IP address. Boom, you're done.
Yeah. And also, like, Saudi Arabia is like no real friend to Israel, but they don't want any
They don't
version of
want that
terrorism,
at
right?
all.
So when I saw that security in those Arab countries, I said to myself, if Israelis came here, there would be, and was a time like you were mentioning division in Israel. And I said to my mom, I said, instead of rioting against securing safety for Jews in Judea and Samaria, going after being against judicial reform, Jews would riot for lack of security in Israel. And so, like, I remember for years, whenever I go to Israel, people would warn me, like, oh, stay safe, stay safe. And I would be offended. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, Israel's very safe. And it's true, for the most part, like, I was there and I never felt like my safety was in danger. I felt safer there that I did in New York. I would tell everyone that.
Yeah.
And then I would get to the Arab countries. this, I mean, it like all the Israeli leaders moving forward need to go to Egypt, even clandestine, in a clandestine manner. And all they had to do, and all they have to do in the future, copy and paste what the Arab countries are doing. Like the UN was also like trying to call out Egypt and Saudi Arabia for human rights violations. They don't care. They don't care. They said we're doing what's needed for our people. If you have a problem with that, then F off. Do not
Yeah.
bother us.
We
And
have to have that mentality.
yeah, like I just posted the other day last week. I said the biggest, again, this is my opinion. I said the biggest threat to Israel is not Hamas, it's not Iran, it's the need to please the world. And
Yep.
that's a very
I
shtetl
agree.
mentality. Where like most Israelis are not, their ancestors never spent time in the shtetl. You're talking about these hardy Mizrahi and Sephardic, Jews, and we as Ashkenaz, we also have roots with Sephardic Jews because 20,000 Sephardic Jews were the first. 20,000 Italian Sephardic Jews were the first to enter the Ashkenaz region. We're all
Mhm.
connected. We should all have that tribal warrior, mentality. And so
Absolutely.
what you were saying, I wanted to expand on that. You said we should have known, right? So I'll give my piece and I want to hear from your perspective. Again, that's not where my mindset was in October. October, I was just numb. I
Mhm.
was still shocked at that point because, again, coming from such a peaceful week in Israel, and then, I was used to wars in Israel. Like, okay, like there's a war. We don't send our troops in. And again, I became a Zionist in 2014. So, like, I missed the 2014 war. So, whatever happened there, like, I had no idea. So I'm talking about like 2014 through now, like, okay, like there's some missiles, we attack, and then it's like over within a couple of weeks. Like that's what I've been used to. So October, I was numb, I was shocked, not shocked by the world's reaction, but just like shocked at what happened. And then I did, like more analysis. And I said to myself, for decades, Hamas has been promising this genocide. They were not hiding it. Like the difference is, right? Like during the Nazi occupation, the Nazi era in Europe, they were hiding their crimes. They didn't want anyone to find out about Auschwitz. They didn't want to find out about other,
Did
uh,
it well too, swept under the rug.
exactly, like everything was recorded. People were being killed, like in their party that were maybe like not, hiding it well enough. Here, these subhuman rats, no other way to describe them, they were boasting about it, right? Like, we're going to kill all the Jews. It's in their charter, even, right? So, if subhuman rats, murderous rats, are telling you that we want to kill you, and you look next door to Egypt, right? And so, most Gazans are mostly Egyptians, right? A little bit of former Israeli Arabs who only came to Gaza to help the Arab armies kill Jews faster,
Mhm.
some Saudis, and then the Black people in Gaza. I only found this out like 4 months ago.
But they're segregated.
Not only were they segregated, but they were slaves in the
Yeah,
1950s.
they love doing that. The Arabs love it.
Yeah, and they like, first of all, I knew that there was slavery until the 50s and 60s in the Arab countries, but I didn't understand that that's because I saw pictures before of some Black Gazans. I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I guess they're not that racist, but they are, and they came as slaves.
Oh, racist?
Mhm.
Honestly,
Yeah.
like I've never met like more racist people than these Arabs.
In New York City, I don't know if you remember on the news, this was like a decade ago, there was this cab controversy because these Arab cab drivers were not picking up Black people. And I saw it
Yeah.
firsthand. I remember hailing a cab, and now I take Ubers, but before I was taking cabs. So I was hailing a cab, the cabbie stopped to take me, but there was a Black woman. I mean, I didn't see, like, I wasn't paying attention. But then I looked up and I was like, wait, this woman's been was here before me. So I told the cab driver, I said, this lady is in front of me, so I'll just take the next one. And he just sped away, did not take her. And this was happening all over the city until they finally got sued. So
Sure.
when we see these Black people, Black liberals who are supporting Hamas and anti, I'm like, do you like
If
not
they
have
only knew. If they
well,
only knew.
they only knew. But then, okay, so yeah. So then I said to myself, over the past couple months, all Israel had to do, A, pay attention to what Hamas has been promising for decades. It's not like it's a new entity. They've been in place. They were created when in 87, right? And then after they took over in a landslide election in 2006, they again have been upping the rhetoric. So again, your immediate neighbors are telling they want to kill you and all your people. And then you look next door to Egypt. And what is Egypt doing? Egypt is not having any work permits whatsoever. It has not just a steel wall, it has a series of walls, right? So, like one wall, and then you have miles of empty land, then another wall, miles of empty land, then another wall. So, even if like there was some kind of infiltration from the Gazans back into Egypt, it wouldn't even be possible because, like, physically, they would get shot along the way. So that was not happening. And then they kept their border closed, most of the year except during Ramadan. And when I was in Israel with the American Friends of Magen David Adom, they were so proud to take us to the border. So we went to, okay, and help me with pronunciation. It's called Erez Crossing.
The Arras crossing, yeah.
Erez Crossing.
Yeah.
Okay. My Hebrew is awful. I need to work on that.
No, it's
So
great.
we met with the director, and this is what I want to ask you because from a policy angle, I don't understand. So we
Okay.
met with the director, and he was lamenting the fact that not enough work permits were being issued to the Gazans.
Who said this?
The director of the border crossing. Like I was shocked. Like I didn't say anything at that time, but
See, and this is why, like, we're the only ones to blame. Why are you even allowing these people to work in your like country? They shouldn't even be in Gaza at this rate. There are enemies. Like, they don't want us to live. The majority of people who, did what they did on October 7th, they were workers on these kibbutzim. They
and they
had
helped plan.
everybody,
Yeah.
yeah. They were collecting evidence. They're not our friends. They have no reason to be there.
So let me ask more of an in-depth question. So because for me, like you're a little bit more of an expert on this, but if you don't know, like no, no pressure. So I was getting all these numbers. This was like, like October when all the arrests were happening. So I was reading a number that 1,000 civilians, quote unquote, from God, when I say quote unquote, because like to me, everyone in Gaza is like Hamas,
They're all
right?
guilty.
Exactly. So, but civilians like not like officially part of the Hamas military, right? So 1,000 civilians infiltrated and helped brutally murder Jews. But then I read somewhere else it was actually like 40,000. But then I read somewhere else that actually it was like all of the workers, which was like 40,000, they were the ones who helped Hamas for years, for several years, plan this genocide because they knew the ins and outs of all the homes and who was
Mhm.
out for Shabbat and who had dogs and who had children. So, do you happen to have more of the numbers? Because for me, like I mean, look, more than like one civilian is guilty enough, but I just was getting different numbers.
So the numbers that we're being like provided with right now are nothing we should trust because it's being determined by the health ministry of Gaza, which
Oh
is
no, I meant from the Israeli side. Like, they were saying like we
they're
arrested.
trusting them at this rate. I mean, we can't count them. They always bump up the number, and sorry, but like, I mean, like, even if we give a reasonable number,
Mhm.
they're going to say something else that's 10 times bigger. It's because it's Pallywood and they just, you know,
But in terms of the arrests of the terrorists, right? So I know that I do remember this that there were 4,000 terrorists being arrested in Judea and Samaria after the massacre, like in the weeks, like, afterwards.
yeah.
Um, so it just like that alone, and then you can just like imagine the numbers coming in because it's true. I mean, like, I remember being at the border crossing, and he was saying 40,000 work permits is not enough. I want to see 60,000, 100. I'm like, what is wrong with you? But and it was such like a show. Like he had these Gazans we saw them crossing the border. And by the way, it was a very nice border. It looked like a little airport.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, like I thought I was like I remember even like putting on like my worst sneakers, like thinking this would be some like shithole that we would
Mhm.
have to like be in. And I got there, I was like, oh, it's like air conditioned, it's
It's nice.
nice,
What's going on?
it's airy, it's spacious. Anyway, so these like Gazans were, like going through the security line and everything. And so he pulled aside like two of them and he's like, what do you think about Hamas? Okay, so remember this was end of 2022. And so of course the Gazans like in Arabic, like fuck Hamas.
Hmm.
And so the director was so proud to like share that with the Jewish group, like,
Yeah.
look, these
Full
Gazans.
propaganda. They
And
all support it. They're
and
all
I
involved.
yeah, and I said to my friend who was sitting next to, I said, I guarantee that as soon as that Gazan gets across back to Gaza, he's gonna say fuck Israel.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's
So
plotting out how to, map out October 7th. I don't trust any of them. There's no such thing as an innocent civilian there. They're all, I mean, look at some of the evidence that the soldiers have found. Why is Hitler's face a screensaver on a young girl's iPad?
right. And not just one, like apparently like this has been on
I mean, they really just, if people don't see the signs, it's almost like they're refusing to.
Mhm. And
These
so
people don't like us. They hate us. They want us gone. And there's no solution. There's no two-state. There's no nothing.
and
That's
let's even talk about this two-state solution. So like, it's up to us, not you and me, but like us as a collective community. When people say two-state solution, okay, I'm sorry. I look, I used to love Netanyahu. He's on my shit list.
yeah, same. Same.
Okay, so I like first of all, okay, like imagine this. Let's say you're a prime minister and 1,200 of your citizens are murdered. Would you like not resign like the next day? Like are you even like continuing? But anyway, so we'll get into the policies a little bit later. But what was my point in this? What were we talking about? Help me out here. I just lost
The
my train of
two
thought.
state, the two state.
Oh, two-state solution. Thank you. So, why are the Israeli leaders, not just Netanyahu, but Gantz? I remember being in some kind of conference, not obviously myself, but like through an organization. All he talked about for 30 minutes in the end of 2022 was two-state solution. We need a two-state solution. This and I'm like, can you just shut up about this stupid
Yeah,
two-state solution?
literally.
And so, how come none of the leaders seem to know our actual history and the history of the region? So, all of them should say, thank you, world. We've had a two-state solution since 1922. That is when the British stole 78% of our homeland and created Transjordan, an actual state meant for Arabs on our land, right? Because states are created and countries are not. So like Israel's not a state. I hate when people say state of Israel because like that then it makes others treat it as like a vassal state. Like America treats it like a little child and the EU thinks it can, push it around. Israel is a sovereign country. And what was not a sovereign country was Jordan. It literally was like created like on our space. Why is no one talking about that? And so when we're talking about also, and I'll let you interject in a second, when we're talking about two-state solution, okay, forget about like the fact that one actually exists. So Gaza is the second state, but so is Judea and Samaria, and they're not even linked. They don't have the same people. Like one is mostly Egyptian in Gaza, one is mostly Jordanian. A lot of forced converted genetic Jews, like 40% of those who falsely say Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, they were converted in the 11th century, but they are still genetically Jews. They actually marry each other per the Arab custom of like marrying your cousins, right? A lot of them. So they've actually, held on to those Jewish genes in that way. And then you have Kurds, right? Like most of Hebron, the 97%, that by the way, Netanyahu gave away in 1997 to those Arab occupiers. That was on his that was his policy. So they're all
So over him.
yeah, they're all Kurds over there. So what kind of state are you talking? Like, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general. So it's like usually like if you're talking about a state, it should be at least contiguous, like number one, and have some shared ethnic backgrounds, you would think.
Yeah,
And it
definitely.
so it
Uh,
doesn't make sense. Like, okay, you're now talking about state to Gaza, but what about these Arab occupiers in Judea and Samaria? You know what I mean? Like it just like even that evades any common sense.
I'll be quite honest, like they have no tie to the land. Yeah, they might have been there, but they're not indigenous.
No,
They're
they've been there only since the
Arab.
7th century, which is
Yeah,
a youngin in the Middle East.
exactly.
Right.
And so if they want their own state, they should do it in Syria, they should do it in Jordan, they should do it in Egypt.
They don't want them, right? Because like, and look what happened to Lebanon, right? Like I again,
Really.
I didn't know. I always assumed that Lebanon was a Christian Muslim country. I mean, sorry, an Arab Muslim country, and I learned kind of recently that Lebanon
It's
was
history.
100% Christian until they let in the former Israeli Arabs, and look what happened. You get Hezbollah. You know, Kuwait killed over 250,000 of these former Israeli Arabs because they were creating such havoc. Jordan, remember, you know, what Jordan did, it's called Black September. Correct me on the date if it's wrong, but 70, uh,
It was
what
in the 70s. I know what you're talking about.
was it
Yeah.
70s or was it 80s? We're gonna have to fact check this. But you know, they also like killed off like a lot of those terrorists. So I remember what Jordan said, like King Hussein II, you know, after the genocide, he said, "Not this is our red line. Not one Gazan is coming in." Egypt said the same thing. So people are like, you know, blaming Egypt, like, oh, but Egypt doesn't want them because Egypt is
Nobody does. Nobody
bad.
respects them in the Arab world, and it's so like it's so clear. Like if us Jews in the Middle East were just so firm and tribal like they are, they would
Mhm.
respect us and they would back us more. Obviously, they're not going to love the Jews. I'm not expecting them to, but they would have an understanding. The fact that we're bending over backwards to please the world and make friends with our enemies is just like it doesn't translate. It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to me because, I mean, it's funny. So basically, I've been tapping into TikTok lives with all these anti-Israel crowds, just listening. I just want to hear what type of BS they're spewing. And this guy from Iran got on. He lives in LA. And they ask everyone when they come on, they said, where do you stand? Are you pro Pally or are you pro Israel? And he goes, I'm neither. And I was like, okay, let's hear this. It's interesting. He goes, the Palestinians are the most pathetic crybabies who literally are just like, you get all these things from all the other countries. You don't even have your own nation. You're a joke.
You
I
don't
mean,
have your own
nobody
currency.
respects them. Yeah, no, they use
Can we
shekels.
talk about how they bank with shekels?
Yeah, like what a
If you
joke.
if you hate us so much and you're so independent, go make your own currency. Go have your own bank.
Literally. They couldn't, they can't. They don't have the capability. Their whole identity and culture was created off of a lie and victim like mentality. It's just pathetic. Like go back to Jordan.
I well, not well, Egypt actually, because they're
Yes,
mostly
Jordan, all the above.
yeah.
I'm more concerned with Judea Samaria because,
So tell us what's happening. Well, I do want to clarify for our audience. So most Gazans are actually Egyptian nationals. Most in Judea and Samaria are resettled Jordanians, like you said. So what is going on in Judea and Samaria? Is Israel tackling the Hamas support? Because that's what people, and I didn't understand either, because we were fed collectively that Fatah is moderate, Hamas is the extreme. So at least like in Judea and Samaria we have Fatah, we have Kogod, and everything's like hunky dory. But then you read and Abbas doubled down on this after the genocide, like, oh, so not only have we been financially supporting Hamas, but now we're actually going to be part of Hamas. And I also was researching news to me that, you know, how in the Jewish press, it's always been presented, oh, so Abbas is a dictator. So that's why he hasn't held elections in 16, 17 years.
He's
Yes,
a
he's
softie.
right. But the reason he hasn't held elections in actuality, because he knows that he will lose to Hamas, because the majority of the there's just no other historically accurate word to say but Arab occupiers. The majority of the Arab occupiers in Judea and Samaria in area A and B are Hamas supporters. Many reasons.
To
Obviously,
an extent.
their leader, UNRWA. UNRWA operates Judea and Samaria. They operate in the eastern portions of Jerusalem. They operate obviously in Gaza. So here we go. But what is the path forward militarily in Judea and Samaria? Like, do you think Israel is going to do more in Judea and Samaria? Or
Hope I don't see it happening because apparently it's controversial to, live in your homeland. But I mean, I'll say this. Everybody, PIJ, like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, they'd probably rip each other apart if it weren't for us being in the middle. The West Bank Arabs and the Gazan Arabs do not get along.
Judea and Samaria. I just want to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Judaism, you get what I'm saying.
I would say for our audience, like, you know, we have
For us, yeah, it's Judea Samaria. It's the West Bank of Jordan. That was later on. It's
and
second.
it was also a 1950 Jordanian occupation term.
Oh
So,
yeah, what is it?
well, that's what West Bank. It was
West
a
Bank.
yeah, it was
Oh, got you.
and they used it because they knew, you know, obviously Judea and Samaria has been Yehud and Shimron in Hebrew has been around for thousands of years. So the reason the Jordanians made up the West Bank, well, for two reasons. Number one, because Israel is on the West Bank, right, of the Jordan River, and eventually they wanted to conquer all of the West Bank, right, not just Judea and Samaria and half of Jerusalem, but also West Bank erases all connection to the
To
Jewish
our
people.
history.
Yeah. And so what they were doing, you know, they ethnically cleanse for our audience, right? Like information, they ethnically cleanse Jews from our ancestral heartland. And so they did, you know, this was an occupation of 19 years. So West Bank literally upholds the occupation um,
Mhm.
term for that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So in terms of no, but like I was reading that they were doing like military some strikes like
Yeah.
in Samaria.
Yeah.
So
All
what so what do you
go
think goal I'm sorry, so what do you think their goal is? Is it just like to manage these terrorist groups, or do you think that they're going to actually eliminate them to the point of
the IDF and the
yeah,
police.
yeah.
So from my personal
Without giving away too much information, of course.
yeah, with my
Mhm.
feedback from my husband, there's a big ISIS presence in the West Bank, or sorry, Yehuda Shomron. Um, they're doing what they can. It's preventative, and honestly, like if it weren't for Itamar Ben-Gvir, our hands would be completely tied and it would blow up in our faces. The fact that a lot of Jews who live in Yehuda Shomron are, held to a different standard than these Arabs, these Arab occupiers who are living there, is just, it's disheartening. I mean, I remember going once to Yitzhar, okay? Beautiful, beautiful community of Jews surrounded by Arab occupiers. And I pull up with a very dear rabbi to Zalman and I. He drove us, kind of like a tour guide. It was really fun. We wanted to give him like books for the shul he's building. It was amazing. But tell me why Magav, the border police, were standing there trying to keep us from giving him like Sfarim for his shul.
Mm.
This is a Jew living in his indigenous homeland, and the police are commanded by the authorities and like to keep us from like having a Jew live in his homeland and like practice Judaism. Like it's so back ass words. That's what it is.
I just don't understand the mentality, right? So one of the, and I was talking about this with my Chabad rabbi. Again, like I'm not like super part of Chabad, but we've been part
Same.
of the community for many, many years, over 10 years through my mom.
Good. They're great.
We've had lots of discussions. He knows, I'm secular because it's Chabad. They're not pushing anything. Of course, they want you to be more involved, but like at your own pace. So
Mhm.
we're getting there. Anyways, so he was telling me that, and this was obviously after the genocide, we're all like angry and we're trying to make sense out of the senseless. He said, in the Torah, it says, rise and kill before being killed. Now, it does not mean, for non-Jews who may be listening, it does not mean like go out and murder. Obviously, murder is against our 10 commandments, but it means that when you as an individual, your family, your community, your nation is being threatened, you go take care of that threat. You do not wait.
We
So
have a religious obligation to do so to defend our people.
right, and it's a societal also, right? Like the Judeans, we like, and I
Sure.
think we touched upon this before. So many Jews take tikkun olam, bastardize that, right? Like light unto the world. And it was something you brought up that's so pertinent to what we're talking about before, or something you said before that's pertinent to like our discussion right now, is that we want to meet people where they are and compromise before doing what's actually right. And I see that all the time. I have discussions on this, about this online. Oh, well, like I'm not using the right terminology because I want to meet people where they are, or like, I don't want to be too pro-Israel because I want to meet my friends where like, first of all, why are you friends still with people who are anti-Israel? Number one, they clearly don't respect you. And what's with this like meeting and compromising? Like, were we like meeting the Nazis where they were? Were we meeting like the Nazis supporters and collaborators, over 80 years ago where they were? No, we were not. Were we as Judeans meeting the Romans, even though we invited the Romans in? So that's something to note. But still, like when they turned on us, we were not like meeting them where they were. So what's like now with this like, okay, so we took Tikkun Olam, we bastard some Jews took that and bastardized it. And it's the same Jews who are forgetting that we're a tribal, like we were mentioning this before, we're a tribal Middle Eastern people. And yet some of these policies from this fakakta government, for those who don't know Yiddish, just like insane government, like we're acting like we're guests in our homeland.
Yeah.
Like we're acting like what they accuse us of being. Like we're from Europe, even though we're not. And we're just here temporarily. Like I'm sorry for our existence. Please, like go on with like your hateful policies. Like oh, but like we're meek and this and that.
Yeah. Like enough with the Jewish guilt, folks. At the end of the day, the people who are pushing for the Western government and wanting to be like America in the Middle East, these are the ones who are holding us back, and they're very much like a part of our community and a part of this establishment of the state of Israel.
And here too,
Very-
it's like here you have Jews, who are very pro-Israel, but they want to be pro-Israel
Are
within.
they though? Not really.
Right, you're right, you're right. They claim they are, but there are these
They're
establishment
not.
Jews. Mhm. They
I
don't.
mean, I have these people who, go on rants who won't look me in the eyes when I see them in person in Cleveland. They like avoid me at all costs. Like they're posting about Joe Biden and he's such a friend of Israel. Like, first of all, like get out of
On
your
what
weird
planet?
delusional, like, why are
On
you
what
lying to yourself?
on what planet does someone have to be on? Because it's not ours. That they would think that Jihad Joe is pro-Israel.
That's what I'm saying. Like, First of all,
Was it refunding Iran? Was it refunding UNRWA? Was it refunding PA? Was it refunding Hamas? Like, I didn't know
the
that the
man
still
is
works.
a spineless politician. He's changed his views on so many different things throughout the years. I mean, like, he just wants to, like, he's a politician. That's why I don't like politicians. Um, and I mean, the fact that these Jews are so brainwashed, it's heartbreaking to me. And like, why won't you look at me? Like, there was one instance where I saw somebody who used to work in Hillel, okay? And I was on the Hillel board in Kent State, and I went to this event, and I haven't really like immersed myself in the Jewish community here because I grew up not from like I am now, but she wouldn't even make eye contact with me.
Because she knows you're right. And so she's probably
She
embarrassed.
knows who I am
Yeah.
very well. We work together. And at the end, as I was leaving with Zalman, she goes, "Hey, how are you?" Like, and then I see the next day her father posts something about, Joe Biden is the reason. Like, he is such a friend of Israel. And I just got sick to my stomach. Like, these people just don't get it. They're literally pushing us back into another October 7th. This would have never happened if we didn't have Jews like that.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Actually, I call them Jew-tards, those
Yeah,
libtards.
they don't.
Jews. Not only that, first of all, I'm going to say something very strong. I say it online. I will say it often as I can. Jews in America who voted for Jihad Joe. I don't blame them for Obama because they didn't know. Okay, but by now, by 2020, they should have known. Jews who voted for Jihad Joe have Jewish blood on their hands.
Yep, I've been saying it too.
Right.
Agree with you 110%. And the fact that some of them still don't recognize it and come to terms with it and, change their mindset and their political beliefs, like, that's even worse.
And I'll tell you this, like my sister, I mean, she claimed she was like not anti-Israel. She kind of was. She was like embarrassed that I became a Zionist, outspoken, trying to share information. Oh my gosh, you talk about Israel too much. So October 7th, unfortunately, woke her up. Like it took 1,200 murdered Jews to like for her to become, like super supportive. So
Mhm.
she's a liberal. But the thing is that Jews like that who are liberal, they look at the progressives, right? And they say, well, it's the progressives who are crazy, right? It's the progressives who are marching with Hamas supporters and who are, storming the Capitol, all that. But they don't understand, like, fine, you are not physically supporting the terrorists, but your vote contributed to the murder of 1,200 people and 253
Exactly.
people that have been held captive, and who knows how many are still alive, right? Because Hamas is not providing any proof of life, and they're not even in charge of the hostages, right? Like they were being sold off, and God knows what. So the thing is, too, yes, we can blame Jihad Joe, and trust me, like I have, and he should. But let's also blame collectively the Jews who influence Jihad Joe. Like
Mhm.
if not now is a huge influence. J Street is a huge influence on that administration. You had Ambassador Nides, who first of all was being lauded by AJC, the American Jewish Committee, invited to their conference. And I spoke out about that. It's like, how would you have such an anti-Israel ambassador representing your organization? And so he was on a webinar with If Not Now, and he said, your mission is my mission. And that is to, and I quote, de Judaize Jerusalem.
What?
The Jew. Look at Blinken. Blinken is a Jew. We can't get away from that fact. He's doing
The
everything.
Schumer.
Schumer's a Jew. Mayorkas, I mean, yes, like he doesn't have any influence on Israel, but like the border also like influences all of this. So
Yeah,
he
just bring in the terrorists. Why not?
exactly, and then we have Jews who are like, oh, like this administration is so Jewish, and there's more Jews, but they're not the right Jews. Like I would rather have an administration Judenrein without any Jews, but like does the right thing. Like I don't need representation. Like maybe because
I
I'm
don't
a
want Jews in the government
I
unless
agree with you.
they're
I
in
don't
it well and they're real ass Jews.
not even that. I don't think this is just a very this is not a professional opinion. This is like very personal. I think it would be dangerous for America to ever have a Jewish president.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you.
Yeah, because everything would be blamed. It's like either you're doing something wrong for America, you're doing something wrong for Israel, you're doing something good for Israel. Now you're like backstab, and it's crazy. And by the way, it's not just Democrats anymore. I'm seeing a change in the Republican Party. And look, I'm a huge Trump supporter. I really am. I'm voting for him enthusiastically in 2024. But
Mhm.
I have seen firsthand that the party is becoming more diverse. More Muslims voted for Trump than Jews as a percentage
Isn't
without
that a shame?
yeah, without doing anything for Muslims. He did nothing for Muslims. He did so
No.
much for people. So and I'm not saying like he's doing this, I'm just saying like from an analysis point of view, where's the ROI to help the Jewish community? There, like, we do so much. We're not being, thanked by it in terms of political support. And now we can't deny it, there's a growing isolationist portion of the Republican Party. Yes, a lot of them are libertarians, but libertarians vote Republican. So,
I
Trump
mean,
yeah, Trump coming in, I don't think is going to be this like band-aid that Israel's looking for. And then plus two, like, look, Trump is only here for another 4 years if he wins. Or I mean he won, but you know what I'm saying? Like if he's like allowed to take office. Um, and then I'm thinking, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So again, this is like a deep like analysis aspect here. Yes, we can blame Jihad Joe and he should be blamed in policies. But Trump being in office and defunding all the groups, do you think October 7th, regardless of what we were doing in America, do you think it was bound to happen anyway? Or
yeah,
no? Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Because of
Because it,
because of Israel's policies, right?
yeah, not even the policy. It's even, the division in the country between the people. The fact that secular left-wing, self-hating Jews are attacking religious Jews in the streets. What is this? This is not like what our country was built to be. You're literally like your own people's worst enemy. Like, stop it, cut it out. They saw the opportunity.
Hmm.
Arabs saw the opportunity. They said, okay, these people are just an absolute shit show. They're going at it. They're super divided.
They're distracted.
Exactly. They have a holiday. So let's just go in. Let's do it. And they did. Point blank. Period. I mean, it has not, I won't say it has nothing to do with Jihad Joe, but like at the end of the day, it's on
Well, he
us.
made it easier
He
because
made
he
it way easier. He gave Iran money.
right.
I mean, the fact that we even have people in our government right now, like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, is just like repulsive to me. These are full-blown terrorists, terrorist sympathizers. They support them openly. And I'm sorry, but that's not what America was built off of. We don't align with this whatsoever.
But I'm gonna say something controversial. And I know it's not gonna be
Let's do
popular.
it.
I'm sure I'll get a lot of emails as I do when I say controversial things on these platforms. When we look at the Middle East, who are the most safe and successful countries?
Israel and the UAE is Saudi
Well,
Arabia,
well, in terms of safe, not
and
successful, safe and successful. I guess
Iran.
what I mean by successful and it's like safety and okay, so
Iran.
as of late, it's been the dictatorships like Egypt and Jordan. Then you obviously have the Gulf states, right? They keep their population in check. And
Mhm.
so look, I love my freedom. I live in America. I'm so thankful my parents came to this country. However, if I were Israeli or leading a some kind of coalition in Israel. I do not think, at least for the immediate future, maybe like a couple of years, maybe 5 years, I think having a democracy in Israel in a wartime and then in a couple of years immediately after wartime, I don't think a democracy is safe to have.
Doesn't work.
I think that Israel during this time should be a dictatorship with the right leader, of course, right? Like let's say like a right leader's, chosen or whatever. But like to have these, we see it on the news, these protests like for ceasefire, against ceasefire. And then the Jews in America, they're looking at these protests like, oh, but look how much of a democracy and liberal. And so I was brainwashed because you're talking about brainwashing before. I was brainwashed for years, even when I became a Zionist, that how do you pronounce his name properly?
None.
Kahana. Kahana was an extremist. I remember this one gentleman who actually was a former soldier, got injured by a Hamas rocket. He defriended me because I was a Kahanist. I was like, the hell is that? He's like, you're a Kahanist, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. Like, and it's like, and then I felt bad. I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't mean to be a Kahanist, right? So like even in the Zionism community, like a lot of us are brainwashed, like don't be a Kahanist. But I've been watching Kano videos, and there was this one video. First of all, I love all of them. So I'm a proud Kahanist now. And I
Yeah.
was watching this one video, and he said, we forget that we're not the Middle West, we're the Middle East. So
Democracy
what
doesn't work.
right, what flies there does not fly here. And so I don't know, like, I think, look, it's not another war, like you said, and I agree with you. This is a war for survival. And I don't and my fear is that even some Israelis don't understand that. Like they think that, oh, okay, it's another war,
No,
another 6 months, we'll get through it. They're planning the next genocide out of Judea and Samaria. You
I'm
know
telling
that.
you, it's a real issue. Like, especially when, okay, so I also at one period in time was kind of like hesitant, like Kahana, like radical extremist, da da da.
You also were brainwashed, just like I was.
Yeah. Then I read his book, They Must Go. And I'm telling you, it
I
just
need to read that.
made too much sense. Yeah. Like he's calling it like it is. And I've read like a lot of his other books, and I can probably say like this man was not at all an extremist. He was an extremist in the sense that he cared about Jews.
Mhm.
He didn't hate Arabs just for fun and games.
Oh, no, of
He
course not.
cared about his people, and he would do anything he could to preserve our livelihood and make sure that we continue as a people. If that's extreme, then you should consider yourself a self-hating Jew. If you're not willing to read any of his texts, listen to any of his speeches, you just hear that, oh, JDL, Jewish Defense League. It's the same idea as the Black Panthers. What, they get a free pass because they're black and we're Jews? Come on.
And then also too, it's that, like going back to the British occupation, like remember it was the British who were denying us to have weapons. Arabs
Mm.
could have weapons. They would have these riots against us. How many dozens of murdered Jews? Who would get punished? We would get punished, right? Like we had to like evacuate Gaza, we had to evacuate Hebron because, oh,
Yeah,
like you guys got look, punish attackers. And that's what's repeating, but not with British occupiers, but by our own
our
Jewish.
own people.
And just like you said, like, you were denied giving, having enough time with a rabbi, like in Judea and Samaria. Like, how dare they? And so,
Yeah,
listen, Judea and Samaria, you drive through these hills, from what I saw, it's mansion after mansion after mansion.
sure. They make billions and billions.
And so, like, why is Israel allowing this like bullshit of like refugee camps? So, like, even like, they were bombing some refugee camp. And I was the first one. I said, there are no refugee camps in Gaza. There are no refugee camps in Judea and Samaria. Those,
I've
like,
been to some of them, the so-called refugee camps. I went on this one trip. Maccabee Task Force funded it. And it's when I was like the Israel chair for my Hillel. And we had a bunch of different, like big organization leaders, like Goyim, come on the trip. We interviewed them, made sure like they're fit, um, and that they were willing to come with an open mind and learn. So it was a very much, I wouldn't even call it like a persuasive trip. It was more like, here's this and here's that. Make your decision, form your opinion.
Those were areas that were kept poor intentionally, and there were no tents, right? Like it's
Exactly. And I got yelled at by the Jewish tour guide who was like undercover Jewish.
Mhm.
Um, because when we went to Bethlehem, I said to this guy, he's going on and on and on about how Jews did this to us and it's Israel and the Jews and they did this. And I was like, so like, what are you doing for your own people? And
Mhm.
the tour guide like pulled me aside. He's like, you need to stop. Like, don't. Like, it will trigger them because it's the truth. He probably lives in poverty too. He's not in the PA. Like, next.
But that's
I
the thing. It's like, well, first of all, let's talk about poverty, right? Because in the media, it makes it seem like, okay, so everyone in Gaza is poor. By the way, we've seen the videos. Those are
keep
not poor
seeing
videos. Those are nice houses. Those are nice cafes.
this.
You do not have an obesity problem in your society if you're that poor. Okay. Like there are weight loss
Really.
centers, or they were in Gaza. And their famine is a very nice famine to have. Like I saw this picture from yesterday's market. There was so much baklava. I'm like, ooh, that looks good. You know what I mean? Like the Jews, or like the other day, I saw a video of this Gazan complaining that there wasn't enough Dutch cheese. And I commented, I said, if only the Jews of during the Holocaust had Dutch cheese, I think they would be a little bit happier. You know what I mean?
Send him to Holland. I mean, what do I care?
No, but, you know what I'm saying? Like there's food, and there's
Right
aid.
to Amsterdam.
Unfortunately, yeah, unfortunately there's aid coming into Gaza, which a whole other discussion that we don't have time for. But anyway, so the thing is that there's this great book. I recommend you and everyone else to read it if you have not. It's called Catch the Jew. Have you heard of that before?
From who wrote it?
Tevye Tenenbaum.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So he goes in. So for those who are not familiar, so he looks again, like, skin color is not a race. Like, so everyone understands. Haplogroups are a race. So there are Jews come in all different colors. So he's, on the lighter skinned Jew side. So he pretended to be German, and he went to area A and B of Judea and Samaria. He got meetings with all these government officials, because they love the Germans. I mean, now Germany is more on the Israel side, but back then they were financing a lot of these anti-Israel activities. Anyway, so he, was pretending to be a German. So they were taking him on a tour of refugee camps. And he saw that it was a whole production. They literally were like building these like makeshift camps, like literally overnight.
Actually, yes. It is
And
crazy.
yeah, and then at the end of the he saw it with his own eyes. And at the end of the day, production would like basically shut down. And so we're talking about poor people. Yeah, like so not everyone in Judea and Samaria that are Arab are rich. Not everyone in Gaza was rich. However, what people forget to talk about, there are poor people in Israel. There are poor Jews. I saw like I got a falafel near Mahne Yehuda, and there were a couple of Jewish kids that were begging us for food when I was there in end of September. There are poor Jews in Israel too.
Why
So
is the majority of Holocaust survivors in Israel living in poverty?
yeah, it's
We did something
mhm,
very wrong.
right.
And I
But
really don't care about the Arabs. They're
mhm.
not my problem. They're not my people. Move on.
And also there are poor people everywhere. Like there are poor people in New York,
Yeah.
but only like if you're not living in a mansion in Judea and Samaria, like that's like that's a problem.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, right? Because I know that, I definitely want to get into all the great work that you're doing with Nevut. And so, first of all, how does the Lone Soldier program work within the IDF? Because again, like from my perspective, I just have seen people like post, like on Facebook, like, oh, like I, went on birthright, and then I could not stop thinking about joining the IDF, so I'm becoming a lone soldier. I am friends with this other guy who I spent some time with in Israel, and the same thing. He's like, oh yeah, like, I was a lone soldier. but no one talks about the process of becoming a lone soldier. So if you can dive into that a little bit more, and what does a lone soldier actually mean in
Yeah.
India?
So a lone soldier means it's anybody from a different country around the world. You can come from America, South America, France, Europe, where literally anywhere, and you voluntarily join the IDF. Or as an Israeli lone soldier, you don't have a relationship with your family, you might be kicked out of your house or an orphan. That would also be considered a lone soldier.
I did not even know that.
Yeah, so that's us. And I mean, what do you want me to tell you about
So like
my
is there okay, so like in Israel, from what I know, again, you can correct me if this is not correct. So, at I believe 18, right? Kids go into the army, right? Men serve three years and women two, right? And then there's also like resources.
defense?
Right. And then also like there's resources, right? Like I believe that there, again, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. This is just like what I read and absorbed. There are like pre-army programs, like for
Yeah.
Israelis, right? Like in high school, like, you're already kind of gearing up for it, you know what to expect. So if you're a lone soldier coming obviously from outside, those that come from outside of Israel, there's none of that, right? There's no high school program. So what's, I guess, like the process of getting these soldiers like up to, or like your personal experience, right? Like how did you get up to speed, right? Like so you make Aliyah and then suddenly you're in the army. Like is there extra training for lone soldiers? Are there like those maybe who don't speak Hebrew as fluently? Like how does that work? Like when all of the instructions are in Hebrew? Like to me that it's fascinating.
Yeah, so basically they do have programs for lone soldiers who are planning to draft like pre-army things. Um, my organization, Nevut, I've been working on personally creating a mentorship program and putting Americans in touch with the proper resources. For example, if guys want to go and study in yeshiva for a few years and then draft, we have that. We can put you in touch with the people and you can have a mentor who's been through it and you can ask questions, they'll support you. So that's what we're working on right now. My experience was a bit different than the average lone soldier. I drafted during COVID.
Wow.
I
Okay.
made all the yeah, so basically going back, like my husband now, he was my boyfriend then, but he has, so his mother is from Israel. She was born there. Well, no, maybe. Yes. Okay. No, her family's from Ukraine. They all made Aliyah and they live in Kiryat Gat. Beautiful family, supportive family. Um, and so it was easier for him to get Israeli citizenship, my
Okay.
husband. So then from there, he was living with his uncle and aunt, and he learned Hebrew because they're full-on Israelis.
Mhm.
Um, and so he didn't have to go to Mikveh Alon. Mikveh Alon is a basic training base for lone soldiers from all around the world. My whole team was from former Soviet Union, like Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, like you name it. No one spoke English except for me, a lady from Moscow, and an Australian, and then one of my best friends from Crown Heights. Um, so it was interesting. And on that same base at Mikveh Alon, they also have like a division for guys that are Druze and Bedouin, like Arab guys who want to be in the army. So they also teach them Hebrew, and that's their basic training as well. And I know they also have a different division on that base that is for what they call problematic kids who are just needing some guidance, apparently. I don't know. They were
Well,
kind of rowdy.
the Army is good for that. I mean, we have that in America too, right? Like
Mhm.
special divisions for that. But in terms of Hebrew, so you said like your husband, already knew a little more Hebrew. What about you? Did you come in knowing Hebrew, or did you go to?
So I could read it, but I didn't understand. So like it to this day, like I still get really self-conscious about communicating, and like that's probably why I got the job that I did, like translating for highly ranked officers at the Army HQ who didn't know a lick of English, making them a PowerPoint. Um,
And so, but I just want to interject one thing. So, okay, this is like my confusion. So, if you're in the army, right? Like it's not a foreign country. This is our homeland, but still, it's a foreign tongue in a way. Like it's not your everyday tongue.
mhm.
Your drill instructor, I'm assuming the Israeli army has those, right? And like, or I don't know, what do you call them? Like a commander, like
It's mifaked. It's like a commander.
the commander. So your commander, I'm sure, is like not saying nicely, like, please do this, right? Like they're probably like, on you, and you're not, comprehending everything. Like how does that work?
So I drafted really late in age for women. And a lot of my commanders were younger than me.
Oh, okay. So on top of everything, they were younger, yeah.
Yeah, so I understood the majority of what they said, but I just really lacked the ability to respond.
Okay.
I think at some point I got frustrated with like just their way of going about things, and I stopped responding in Hebrew.
But like what to do physically, right? Because like you're seeing like
Sure. I mean, I understand everything. I don't have the patience to respond to them in Hebrew because
oh,
I
okay, yeah.
overthink the grammar and this and that. And I'm just like, okay, no.
Right. So you have to get the physicality of it done. So then, okay, this is another question that I know many people have, not just myself, about the lone soldiers. So, okay, it's a lone soldier program, right? So then when the program is done, do the lone soldiers then go to, okay, how do I phrase this properly? Okay, to different units of the professional army, right? Or are they reserve? Like how does, if you could walk me through all of that?
Yeah, so after basic training, at least for me, everybody goes to different units that are just like your average Israeli.
Mhm.
Um, they do a different basic training for different combat units. And for me, I went to J6, which was like very much aligned with my studies in university. Um, so I didn't have to do another training. But for example, my husband, he did the regular basic training and the training for the border police, which not many Americans get into, which is really interesting.
That's
Uh,
impressive.
yeah, he's the most impressive. I'm so proud of him. But anyways, yeah, like I had a lot of girls from my team that I was in at Mikve alone, like the basic training. They went everywhere.
I see. So basically, the lone soldiers, it's like basic training, but for basic training for would be soldiers from all over the world outside of
Yeah.
Israel. And then once
It's
you get to
like,
that, okay, and
yeah,
then once you get that program, then you're just part of the army as
yeah,
any. Okay.
you're part of the army to begin with.
Mhm.
That's your basic training, and it's also kind of like an ulpan. So
Mm.
you learn the language and you do the same thing in basic training.
Seems like a great deal. Like you get to contribute to your homeland and learn Hebrew. Those who might not know, get integrated a little bit more into the culture. So, if you can talk to us a little bit more, I know that your organization that you're part of, Nevut, is very impressive and especially now very much needed. So, if you can, discuss a little bit more, not only like what Nevut does, any ways that we can help, as an audience. And also just like now with this war raging on, what have there been more lone soldiers that are enrolling now? Is it close? Like, now with these changing needs, that would also be interesting to find out.
Yeah, so basically, it's funny because we actually had this race, like a bike and a run fundraiser that we had planned after, I forget the date. It was sometime mid-October. And then October 7th happened. And we had like over 100 signups within 24 hours. We had like 50 to begin with. And then once the war happened, everybody rallied together. They wanted to like support us, which was so beautiful. Um, and I think, I don't know, Nevut, like I couldn't ask for a better job because it's like so relevant to me and my husband, and it means so much to me. I'm so passionate about it because there's so much potential. There's no other organization, FIDF, any other like lone soldier organization that has the sense of community that we do because we're all so different,
Mhm.
religious, not religious, from different backgrounds. We all came together in February and had a Shabbaton, and it was probably the most therapeutic thing for everybody who came. At least it was for me. And the feedback that I got from other people, I did like a therapy group for spouses. We started a spouse support group. We have a parent support group of lone soldiers and the soldiers themselves. I mean, we have workshops in person on Zoom, same with parents, spouses. Like, it's all about, we're very much dedicated to the well-being of lone soldiers. And we also did like mission to the front lines. So we sent guys from Nevut to go give gear, just, you know, a familiar smile and a hug, some cookies, just out for dinner. It means the world. Like it sounds kind of cliche, but the
Not at
smallest
all. It
thing.
sounds no, it sounds like what's needed, like that emotional support, like
Uh,
anything makes a difference. And so, is it an American organization or is it an Israeli organization?
it's American. We're based out of Rockland County.
Nice. Okay. I grew up not too far from there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I grew up in North New Jersey. So actually,
Nice.
yeah, like Muncie's 20 minutes away from me.
Yeah? Like
Away
Bergen County?
Yeah, Bergen County. Yeah. So
Very nice.
I've been to Muncie multiple times. Evergreen, like yes, I know that whole area.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
I
So
used to live there. Hmm.
what we're gonna do, I would love to do, is to link your organization at the bottom of the recording. So it's gonna be on YouTube, Buzzsprout. So if anyone wants to help, please do. And this is
Yes,
just so needed.
thank you. That would be amazing. We have a Pesach fundraiser right now. A lot of our families who have husbands over in Israel right now in reserve duty, a lot of the wives rely on their husbands for financial income, and it's just hard with multiple kids, whatever it may be. We want to raise money and put people in touch with resources in their communities so they can make Pesach because it's very expensive.
I cannot even imagine. Like obviously, like when I think of heroes, heroes in Israel, no question, my mind just goes to the soldiers first and foremost. But then, since the war started, these army wives are also heroes, for holding down the fort. In
Mhm.
Israel, luckily, like, Jews are having not one child usually or two. Even in a secular society, they're having three, four, I think is on average. And it's a lot. Like I see my sister with one child and she's married, her husband's at home, comes home every day at 6:30 p.m., helps, like is a very, very, present father. I
Mhm.
couldn't imagine without your husband, like at all.
These ladies I've met like through the Nevut spouse support group, I mean, every next spouse that I come in contact with, it's like a genuine relationship and it's inspirational. I don't know how they do it. I don't have any children. But these women are warriors.
They really are. It's like the backbone of our society, right? Like, I mean, yeah, like
Absolutely.
again, soldiers are so important, but then if the society crumbles when the soldiers come back, that's not going to help any matter. So again, these women are so strong.
Yeah.
Many
We're
of
the
them,
ones who influence the next generations. We bring the next generations. You know what I mean?
and also some of these moms are really young. They're like I've seen like 22-year-olds in Israel like having children, and their husband is like serving. It's
Sure.
really, and that's something like American Jews cannot grasp, like for the most part. Like what are 22-year-old Jews doing now in America? They're like out partying. And
Yeah. Lady pie.
so thank you so much for sharing about Nevut. Yeah, I also came across that when I reached out to you again after a couple of months. Like you were so busy, I was so busy. And I was like, oh, like what is that? Like I want to learn more. So I knew like we had to include this in our obviously conversation today. So
Yeah.
I know that you mentioned your husband Solomon quite a few times in a very proud fashion during our conversation. So I would love to know a little bit more about him. I know that or a little bit. I know that he has a bit of an interesting family background that
Yeah.
ties together also with military service and support, non-support. So if you could, delve into that a little bit more, I think that'd be just fascinating for myself and the
Yeah.
audience.
Absolutely. So my husband Zalman, he was born in Williamsburg. He then moved to Muncie.
And
His
so just to, I'm
parents,
so sorry, let's interject. So for those who might not know, and actually I don't know, so Williamsburg, okay, so Crown Heights, that's Chabad, correct?
sure,
And Williamsburg is majority what?
probably not Chabad.
No,
I,
I know they're not Chabad. So are they Satmar? Is it another group or
I would say Satmar, like from my intake, but there's different like Hasidic groups over there. I mean,
it's a mishmash, right? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah, majority Satmar though.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so you're saying that he was born in
Yeah.
Williamsburg. Okay, I just wanted to describe that to those who
Oh,
might.
you're good. Yeah, definitely. It's important. So he was born there, raised there, and I think they moved later on when he was a child to Muncie.
Mm,
This was like when Muncie was being built up. It was like very much not what it is today. Um,
I remember.
yeah, right. So you get it. But he comes from, I mean, his family is Satmar. They come from that sect of Judaism. It's a Hasidic sect. And Zalman decided at one point in his life that this wasn't necessarily for him. And he decided to go to draft in the army in Israel. So he decided to go with probably the most Israeli unit you could draft in, Magav, which is
Mhm.
the border police. Like the few Americans I know that do Magav, like kol hakavod, because it's like a different mentality. Like a lot of the guys in there and girls, they don't speak English, but he I mean, he was in a special forces. It's called Yamas. No, no, I'm sorry, Samag. We're gonna
Okay.
have to edit that.
By the
Samag,
way, what is Yaman, or is that not something I heard about Yaman?
Yamar or Yamas or Yamam.
They were on the ground. They were like the special forces. Is that correct? Yaman?
We have
Yaman?
so many different special forces. That's why I just screwed up the word of Samag. It's like an abbreviation,
Oh,
but
okay.
he was in during his Sadir, like during his regular army service, he was in the border police by Shar Shechem in the old city. And he was in an like a counterterrorism, like riot control unit. So like it was special. And then once he finished his service, he was actually invited to be a part of Yamar Yerushalayim, which is the undercover field intelligence unit. You have to be invited for an interview. It's very, very just, they're psychopaths, but good ones. They're incredible.
And so, did your husband's family, like, how did they react to, like this good Satmar kid making Aliyah, serving in the army? And, maybe there's a misconception, but, we all hear that, some Satmars have a different take on Israel for different reasons.
Sure.
So, and you hear, sometimes you hear those stories of like your husband, like they left the fold and they're now,
Mm.
serving the army or they made Aliyah. And I've heard some families have actually been supportive, some not, it all spans the spectrum. So how did they react?
Yeah, so it depends on the people. And I mean, I mentioned earlier that my Schwieger, my mother-in-law, we're very close. We have a lot in common. She made Aliyah. Her parents made Aliyah, and she was raised in Israel. She's from the Ukraine. Her parents weren't necessarily, they weren't Satmar, but she chose that lifestyle, and, she became more observant, and she has 10 children,
Well, how
and
good to
she's
her.
incredible. She's such an open-minded person. She's an Israeli citizen, and she's Satmar. I mean, like,
Would you say she
people,
supports like Israel, like the traditional way, or is she more the other way?
what do you mean?
Well, there are Satmars who, or other Hasidic sects also who live in Israel, and they live on the land of Israel, but they don't, recognize the government of Israel, for faith-based reasons. They'll say, well, until Moshiach comes, we
Sure.
don't recognize the officiality of this government. But it sounds to me from the description like, if her family voluntarily, made Aliyah, right? And was it like right after the Holocaust, or was it like much much later than that?
Yeah. So her parents are survivors,
Mhm.
and they had a massive family, very, very amazing aunts and uncles that I never expected I would be so blessed to have in this day and time. I couldn't have made it in Israel without them, really. They're amazing people. And she chose the Satmar lifestyle, which is a Hasidic sect that's honestly very beautiful. Like, people have a very big stigma that, oh, they're all Netori Karta and da da da. They are so judgmental. It's honestly the complete opposite. And I had to figure that out for myself. I mean, I was immersed in it, and I've never felt more accepted and supported and loved by my in-laws and my family now. I mean, the reason they don't support per se, like the state of Israel, the government, you know what I mean? Um, it's not because they hate Israel, it's not because they hate Israelis. It's like very much so the fact that they take their religion very seriously. And if there's no Mashiach, like, why are we doing this government thing? Why do we have our own state? And more than that, I mean, like, it's become very secular. And honestly, that's fair enough. I understand it. They respect me. They know my views. They know my opinions, and they're very loving people. So I think it's important to let everyone know that they're very open-minded, and you should have a conversation with someone who's Satmar. because they're very good.
That's actually good to point out because again, I'm just sharing my experience, right? So like in terms of the Hasidic sects, I've never met oh my gosh, I'm blanking on some of them. Who are those what's that sect that wear the white kippah and like they're
Braslov?
Braslav. I never like actually met a Braslav. Like I just see them like when they would go to Ukraine before before that war. Um, and the only experience I personally had with Satmars was not even like personal. It was when I was driving through Williamsburg and I saw an Israeli flag burning. This was probably 2017, 2018, last time I saw it. And so, like, of course, like, you see that, you get a little scared. You're like, okay, what's going on here? But I also was reached out to on Facebook, of all places, by a guy who is Satmar. And he actually said, he's like, you know what? He didn't say we, he said, I love Israel. I just don't love the government.
That's
And
fair. I
so
don't love the government either at this rate.
exactly. I mean, for different reasons, but yes. So, like it was like nice to hear from him that he doesn't hate Israel because like when you see an Israeli flag burning like what else like if we would see that from Arabs on the street
We're
with
the radicals, like the Notori Carta, and they're a very, very small pinch of the bunch.
so
And
is it
I
only
remember,
I'm so sorry so is it only the Natari Kartai who are like the flag burning sect of the
I would
Satmars or
say so. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but from what I understand, they're a very minute group. They're not like their own sect. They're a radical group.
that happens to love cameras unfortunately that they'll like
They
find a
need
camera
help.
or
Like my mother-in-law and we went to hear this one rabbi give like a shiur, like he was going to teach the public and have a conversation with everyone. It was going to be amazing. We were so excited. We love him. He's Israeli. Now, they booked the event at a Satmar hall, and he never showed up. And then all of a sudden, these people with megaphones show up saying that like he's ruining everything in Judaism. He's Sioni, like get over yourselves. Like the fact that you're holding other Jews back from learning, shame on you.
right
I mean, like, do you have any values? And my mother-in-law was very upset with it. She's like, these people are crazy.
just like
It,
we're upset with people in our immediate communities like
you don't, yeah,
certain
you don't
Jews
have to agree with everyone,
right
but like let people do their own thing, especially if it means a Jew that's learning. God forbid you hold a Jew back from learning. That is so against everything we believe in.
obviously. So
Yeah,
the burning question that probably everyone has at this point is we've all seen the images of Hasidic Jews in Israel after the genocide being, for the most part, a lot more supportive, like of the IDF, more, I think I read something, again, the numbers evade me, but like 2,000 Hasidic, people joined the IDF, the recruitment, was a complete surprise.
yeah,
So do you see any potential in the future? I mean, I know your husband, is Satmar, but he also like he said like so did your husband like leave the fold and then
yeah,
join a
definitely. We're modern Orthodox. We're like our own vibe. We appreciate all different types of rabbis and different teachings, but like we're Jews. We're simple Jews. We're honest Jews, and we do our own thing.
understood. Okay, so do you find again like because October 7th was so horrific and do you see that there will be like more support of the military of Hasidic groups, not necessarily Satmar, but just in general, like of Hasidic groups that maybe were not supportive of the military before, and like yeshiva only, that's the only thing that matters.
I've
Is
seen it already. I mean, we
or
shouldn't have.
is this a trend that you think will be sustainable, like after now?
Definitely. These are the only ones who can like actually make it sustainable because, as you've seen, I'm sure, the left-wing anti-reform has already been acting up again and punching police officers in the streets of Tel Aviv. So it was a flash in the pan for their support and unity. But I will say that the more religious Hasidic sects have been like super supportive and they're maintaining that because it was very much a wake-up call after October 7th. And it's almost like God saying, hey, wake up,
Like step up
you
also.
know? Yeah,
And
like put
I
up or
was
shut up type of thing.
I was
You
watching yes, I was watching a podcast. This is directly related to what you just said. I was watching a podcast and they had on, I'm not going to mention his name, but they had on a soldier who also, comes from the more observant backgrounds. And
know?
he made such a great point. He said, when some of our people don't join the army for faith-based purposes, but you have certain segments in Tel Aviv who are secular and don't join the army because they're pro these terrorists or they're
Yeah.
anti-Israel, no one says a word. So he said, how is it okay that they can not join the army, but like when certain people who are a lot more observant don't join the army, then it's like the end of the world. So it's that double.
Makes absolutely no sense. And the fact that like secular Jews are calling out religious Jews on the bus and saying, oh, what did you do for the country? And turns out this guy's like very, very highly ranked, like in the military and reserve duty. So like shame on her. Like we shouldn't judge each other. Like we might dress differently. We might have different values, different beliefs, different opinions politically, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, we're a we're a community. We're one
Yeah,
nation.
one people, and especially when faced with such like atrocities. And
You,
mhm. It's like that. That's like so great. Like, first of all, it's great, like what you're doing. And I see the passion and the fact that this organization exists, Nevut. And it's a positive, although like, it took a tragedy. And I know that there's already some, divisions going on in Israel about the ceasefire, not ceasefire. But hopefully, this will show Jews that, look, it's better when we stick together
yeah,
and
please,
not at each other, and the importance of the army, because I never thought that I would live to see the day that Israel needed to call up 350,000 reservists. Like every time I would see like these wars on TV, their army is good, right? Like they never, at least like in my paying attention, had to call up so many people. Like it wasn't like the equivalent of, as a percentage, more people were called up in October than America had in World War II over the 6 year period. That's what I read, like as a percentage
I
of
don't know, but it would make sense. I mean, people were really like, I mean, it woke up everyone. That's what it was. Like God sent a wake-up call. You guys are fighting with each other. This is not the common, like, this is not your enemy. These are your people. Wake up.
And that's the thing too. I was thinking about posting this. Actually, I will post this probably. That the saying, two Jews, three opinions. That
Sure.
that's great, but like when it comes to recipes, let's say, right? Not when it comes to facts about us that we need to like share, and also what are the right steps to protect our homeland, protect our people. And I think what a lot of the Israeli leaders, this will be like my last point, and then I'll let you also conclude. I think, and it's not fair. It's really not fair. Like, so Brazil, right? Like the Brazilian president doesn't really worry about the Brazilians in the diaspora, right? Like you move to America, you're America's problem, right? Like Italy,
Sure.
the Italian prime minister is not thinking about the Italians in, I don't know, let's say in like South America.
Hmm.
Israeli leaders have to think not only about the Israelis, which by the way are not just responsible for Jews, right? There are Arabs and there's Christians there. There's
Left it.
Yeah, there's some Muslims that actually are very supportive. Like, it's the Circassians. Most of the Muslims in the IDF are Circassian Muslims. who love Israel. Fun fact, the Bedouins, they're actually genetic Jews. The ones in
Frozen.
yeah, the one in not Jews, the Bedouins are Jews actually, genetically Jews. The one in Jordan, Israel, and the Sinai, because they're descendant from the Jews who moved to the Hijaz in Saudi Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula, and eventually they just like made their
That's
way.
crazy. Because
Isn't
you
that
know what's sad is that the biggest Bedouin like city in southern Israel has been very much instrumental to Hamas with October 7th.
that, it probably went back to, did you hear why they were pissed off at Israel? Because, the Bedouins helped Israel so much in 48, 67. Actually, Israel would not have been able to win the war in 48 without those desert trackers. So they used them again in 67, and Moshe Dayan went to speak to the sheikhs, and the sheikhs came to him and said, we're Jews. Like, they're the ones who admitted it. And then there were genetic testing that, confirmed what they were saying. So they said to him, we're Jews. We really want to live with Jews, like, be part, like live among the fold. And Moshe Dayan was part of which party? The Labor Party, right? They were the racist party at that time. I think still are. And he said, we have enough to deal with these brown Jews. He meant the Mizrahim. We can't deal with you Arab Jews also. And that was it. The sheikhs were so I mean, they lost so many of their community members, like helping,
Yeah.
Israel.
You know what's it is crazy is that last time I went to visit my husband while he was in reserve duty, we stayed with one of his friends from his unit who's in Toccoa. It's somewhere in Yehuda or Shomron.
Yeah.
It's like southern, kind of close to Hebron-ish.
And they have like a cool beer festival I read about.
Yeah, no, it's such a beautiful place. And so basically, um, there is a valley, and across the valley, there's houses that are considered to be like Palestinian territory. I don't call them Palestinians. I mean,
The Arab occupiers, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So they live right on the hilltop across from the valley. And he told me that actually these guys who live over there are from Yemen.
Hmm.
They came here a long time ago and they have mezuzot on their doors. They don't know why, but they just do. So they speak Arabic. They have a lot of different Jewish practices that they do, but like they don't understand why. And he lets them paint his house. So it's very interesting.
It is such a fascinating history. So 30 to 40% of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria are actually genetic Jews. So what happened that in the 12th century, sorry, in the 11th century, an Egyptian caliph went over to Judea and Samaria. I don't know why he skipped over the rest of Israel, but just went
Yeah,
to Judea and Samaria and converted everyone to Islam. And so there were Christians in that area, and the Christians, for them, faith was so much more important than the land. So all the Christians left Judea and Samaria. And the Jews who were, I mean, they actually like they had a choice, right? Like they could have left, but they loved the land, felt a connection to the land more than their faith, right? So, and then also they figured, remember, Demitude was very much alive and well, like non-Muslims being treated as second-class citizens. So they figured, okay, fine, we're going to be first-class citizens now that we're Muslim, and but we're secretly going to practice just like the Jews in Spain and Portugal. We're secretly going to practice our faith, but we know that we're Jews. And so the edict only lasted 35 years, but no one came to check on them. So
yeah,
these Jews just continue to live as Arabs, continue to, but, and this is so interesting, King Hussein the First, when he occupied all of Judea and Samaria and half of Jerusalem, did not find a single mosque. In 1948, the only mosque in Judea and Samaria was Al Aqsa, the only mosque. And so he sped up the building of mosques all over Judea and Samaria to try to prove, oh, look, like well, we Muslims have been here so much. And so the government of Israel actually knows which clans are Jews and which ones are not. And unfortunately, well, so there have been a couple clans that actually have helped Israel during the wars. I'm not sure about now, but like in the past. But unfortunately, these are the same clans that have actually turned out the most notorious terrorists also.
Sure.
Mhm. Which, makes sense. I was talking to my advisor, my mentor who vetted, all my materials on CBTN, and he said it makes sense because, now they're living amongst many Arabs, right? Like who are not genetically Jews, and they had to prove their fealty. It's like, oh, like you say you're Arabs, but like, oh, I see a mezuzah, like you said, I see a mezuzah. Like, what are you guys doing on Friday night? There was like a little, like, remnants of Shabbat. Prove that you're actually who you say you are. And that's how some of them have been turned into terrorists. So it's fascinating. So that's why it's like very different. Like if we, again, this is like my policy prescription, I would love to hear yours and we can, end on that. I mean, personally, I think that the Arab occupiers in Gaza have got to go by any means necessary, whether we dress in them, whatever it takes, because it's us or them, right? Like we can, I don't know how Israel can live next to Gazans anymore. There are, like we were talking about before, there are no civilians there. It would take probably 10 generations to like deprogram, you know, such brainwashed people. Like, like in Nazi Germany was only brainwashing for less than a decade. And here we're talking about decades and decades and decades. However, in Judea and Samaria, because 30 to 40% of those Arabs are genetic Jews, right? They're not Arabs. They are indigenous to the land. Those 30 to 40%, what do we do with
I,
them? You
I
know?
would beg to differ on that. I really don't find that they have a tie to the land. And even if they're like forced to conversion to Islam and that's really unfortunate. For me, it's still they have the same culture, the same mentality, and even the ones who consider themselves to be Israeli citizens, I don't see a purpose in them living there.
So you think that they, no matter what, like they just need to go, like no matter
Yeah.
what. Yeah. Yeah. But I think, I don't know, because at least like the Arab occupier, all of them in Judea and Samaria, except for those 30 to 40, which, yeah, I agree. Like if they're producing terrorists, they have to probably go too. But something can be done with Jordan because most of them, you know,
Jordan doesn't want them. They created so much violence and craziness there.
I know, but so many of them have Jordanian citizenship though. So
Right.
like on a legal ground.
Crazy.
So on a legal ground, something can be done to at least like push them out without eliminating them. Let's just say that. Like you have citizenship. So like here, go back to your citizenship issuing country at least.
There's
I
a
mean,
solution. Send them back. You
Israel
have
tried,
the
yeah,
citizenship.
Israel tried to give the Arabs in the eastern parts of Jerusalem citizenship to vote, to be part. So they didn't want it. So like, all right, like
Okay, bye. Go back to Jordan.
yeah, like you
You
don't have.
never.
Mhm. So I don't know. So what do you? So just like to on a forward thinking path. So what do you think like needs to be done to secure the safety of Israel?
They gotta go.
Yeah.
We should have done this when we had the opportunity. We should have never disengaged from Gaza. Like we have ancestral roots there. We should
Yeah,
have
since 145
never.
BC.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
we should have never given that to a group of what we're dealing with today. Um, they have no place. I'm sorry. They really don't have ties. I don't care if they were converted. I don't care. Like, I care about my people. I care about their livelihood and Jewish continuity. And if we don't establish that, we're never going to get there. We're not going to, we're the chosen people. And a lot of people get threatened by that. They think that we're self-righteous and da da da. Well, guess what? It is what it is. We have ancestral ties. God made a covenant with us at Mount Sinai. And from then, the rest is history. We have the land, we're going to continue. And I think the biggest thing is like Jews just need to be supportive of Jews, no matter their observance, no matter, political views. It's Ahavat Yisrael. You love your Jews, regardless of their beliefs and their ways of life. And I think the Arabs have to pack up and go back home because this isn't their home, it's ours.
And if their home hosts don't let them back in, I mean, like, I know this sounds extreme, but it shouldn't be. It's us versus them. And it's come to that point. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing else to say. Like if October 7th genocide did not happen, would I be saying that? No. Like by the way, I am so pro Arab, or I was, before October 7th. I was the one who was getting flack from other Jews, like, oh, like why are you supporting the Abraham Accords? How can you trust Saudi Arabia? How could you go to Saudi Arabia? Like, how come you have Arab friends? I'm like, well, first of all, they're Arab Zionist. Like, I'm not friends with those Arabs who are trying to kill us. But like I was very, very okay, like shit happened in the past. We're moving forward, new alliances. This is the future. And then everything changed on October 7th. And you just like realize, like, yeah, you can be friends. You're going to have partnerships with the Arabs who maybe disagree with you on some things, but are not trying to kill you. But the ones who are trying to kill you have got to go. And I don't care how they go. I really
They
don't.
all have the same sentiment at the end of the day. And the only thing I will say is that I respect the Arabs in the way that they present themselves and their values. They're very honest, they're very open, they're very tribal, and that's something we need to like learn from as
And
Jews.
they stick together no matter what, no matter if they're even
Yeah.
wrong. They're just like supportive of each
They're
other.
like so confused by us. They're like, who are these peace-loving Ashkenazi weirdos who want a two-state solution? They'd actually rather respect, you know,
Mizrahi.
right-wing Jew that's like down to fight for their own land. They get it. It's the same mentality, you know?
Exactly. Well, yeah, like, and actually, genetically, Jews and the Arabs were one people. Like, we literally are genetic cousins, and we split off. When we started forming our nation, we like started, marrying, each other. So we have, like, by the way, in Saudi Arabia, like, I felt not at home. Home is Israel for me. But first of all, there's so many like Jews who were assimilated. That obviously like
Saudi Arabia?
yeah, well, there were so many Jews who ended up in the Hijaz, which became Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So there's actually more than a whisper that the Saudi royal family are actually genetic Jews. And you feel that because when I was in Egypt, I didn't feel like any familiarity with like anyone. I was in Jordan, like with the Bedouins, by the way, I felt some like connection. But then
Mhm.
when I was in Saudi Arabia, like, oh my gosh, you're like, why am I having this? Like, I've been here before kind of feeling. I don't have it in the UAE. I didn't have it in Oman, but like Saudi
Wow.
Arabia was very, very strong. So yeah, but
Interesting.
like, yeah, so even but yeah, like so there are cousins, even the ones who are not like did not assimilate, the Jews did not assimilate. And we are like we're of the people. So, like we keep mentioning, like we need to act like our ancestors and make them proud.
We need to communicate,
Yeah.
in their own language. Otherwise, like, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you so much, Lily, for your time. I was looking very much to speaking with you, and I knew that we would touch a breadth of topics, and we very much did. So I, again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It was such an honor, and keep up the great work you're doing. You're really, really doing amazing work and making a difference in the Jewish people.
Thank
So
you so much. So are you. I look up to you with respect, awe, and honor. Not everyone can serve in the military, move, like to even though it was our home, it is our homeland, but like something very different than what you grew up used to. And on top of that, now working for an organization that helps support the very essence of what's keeping us safe now, and it will be. So thank you so much. We're definitely going to link anything that you want to send related to Nevut, and only success in the future.
Same to you, double to you, triple to you. Thank you so much.
And since it's nighttime here almost, Leila Tov.
Lila Tov. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.